Reprise du débat, l'honorable député de Laurentides-Labelle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I take no pleasure in rising today on Bill C-246. Je suis d'abord et avant tout un député rural. Je suis né à Sainte-Agathe-des-Monts. J'ai grandi à Sainte-Lucie-des-Laurentides. Chez moi, nous cultivons la grande majorité de notre propre nourriture, y inclus nos légumes et nos viandes. Nous sommes une ferme participant dans le programme WOOF, un programme mondial des travailleurs bénévoles sur les fermes biologiques. J'ai dans ma poche un permis de pêche, mon père un permis de chasse, et nous élevons des poulets, des canards et des oies. Nous mangeons aussi beaucoup de gibier. Pour le mois d'octobre, un grand parti de ma circonscription se vide pour la chasse aux chevreuils et aux agneaux. Effectivement, l'année est divisée dans les saisons de chasse pour chaque animal. En tout temps, les producteurs agricoles préparent leurs animaux pour l'abattoir, pour vendre leur viande, pour nourrir les villes. Pour nous, c'est la vie quotidienne dans les régions. All over the world, there are legitimate reasons to raise and slaughter domestic animals or to hunt, trap, and fish wild animals. The world population of chickens, as an example, exceeds the world population of humans by a factor of about 7 to 1. And while there are legitimate reasons to work with animals, there are people who abuse them. For example, worldwide problems such as puppy mills, the wanton waste of shark finning without using the rest of the animal, poaching of elephants and rhinoceros for their ivory, allowing animals to fight, killing animals purely for sport, or slaughtering them in torturous and unethical ways are all places the great majority of us would agree improvements must be made. But that is not, despite the appearance of the social media pressure, the goal of Bill C-246. The bill, as written, and as is before us here at second reading, is not a moderate bill looking to tangibly and positively improve animal welfare. It is an overreaching bill by a passionate advocate whose incredible work on this file I deeply respect, even if I do not agree. There are few members of this place ever to have put their heart and soul into a cause they believe in as completely and selflessly as the member for Beaches East York. I think we all respect and appreciate that. But that is not what is before us. But what is before us is not a bill. Is not a person. And the effect of the bill is to risk criminalizing currently legal animal activity. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that my family belongs in prison for sustainably feeding ourselves. I don't believe tens of thousands of my constituents should be risk prison for feeding their families either. We are reassured in supporting statements that the bill has no effect on current legal activity. But the only reassurance we have is the statements of those supporting the bill. The language of the bill itself is not so ambiguous. Section 182.1 sub 1 sub b reads, for example, everyone commits an offense who, willfully or recklessly, kills an animal or, being the owner, permits an animal to be killed brutally or viciously, regardless of whether the animal dies immediately. It is easy to argue that because killing an animal necessarily results in its death, the act is inherently brutal or vicious. Bringing a legal case against anyone who kills any animal in any circumstances is therefore enabled by this act. There is no exception for aquaculture, agriculture, hunting, fishing, or even accidents, and the instantaneous death of the animal is explicitly removed as a factor for consideration. To add insult to injury, the Criminal Code section 429 sub 2 currently reads, no person shall be convicted of an offense under sections 430 to 446 where he proves that he acted with legal justification or excuse and with color of right. While C-246 fixes the gender-specific references to be gender-neutral, it also removes the justification defense from sections 444 to 446 of the Criminal Code, which is the section that currently deals with animal welfare. The penalty is set at up to $10,000 or 5 years in a federal penitentiary, and regardless of the probability of conviction, the case needed to bring some of these situations to trial would be established by this open-ended bill. A federal penitentiary is no laughing matter. There is one in my riding at the former Cold War missile base, La Mikaza. I toured that facility this summer, and I do not wish to return there as a result of my fall harvest. Now, we are assured by proponents of the bill that the legal system would not tie itself up in these legal cases. This letter I received in my office, for example, reads in part, the Canadian Sport Fishing Industry Association's claims about how Bill C-246 would impact fishing are ludicrous. They state that even the act of baiting a hook with a worm would be considered an act of cruelty according to the bill. The MP for Beaches East York and law professor Peter Seinkoff contend that such claims about the effects Bill C-246 would have are preposterous. Can anyone imagine Canada's criminal justice system wasting time and resources to attempt to prosecute someone over such a ridiculous allegation? Yes, Mr. Speaker, I can imagine that, because were C-246 to receive royal assent, as it is written, a law telling police and prosecutors to do exactly that would be on the books, having been placed there after thorough examination by a majority of parliamentarians, and remaining there until one or several judges, being faced with such a ridiculous allegation in the courtroom, struck down that law. Moreover, the bill contradicts The bill contradicts its proponents on this very point. It creates section 182.5, which states, and I quote, "For greater certainty, nothing in this part shall be considered so as to abrogate or derogate from the protection provided for existing Aboriginal or treaty rights of the Aboriginal people of Canada by the recognition and affirmation of those rights in section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. If the bill does not risk creative new application, why would it need an exemption?" So it begs the question, what purpose is a law whose authors do not wish for it to be enforced? Why go through the trouble of authoring and presenting a bill if the hope is that the justice system will ultimately ignore or reinterpret it? Mr. Speaker, if the desire of the drafters of this legislation is to ensure that existing, accepted, or common practice not be affected by this bill, why does it not state that? These proponents tell us that it will have no such effect. But, Mr. Speaker, in case of disagreement between speeches in Parliament and the text of the resulting Act, it is the text of the Act that will form the basis of the criminal case. Nobody here is against stopping the genuine abuse or mistreatment of animals in any circumstances. But my job here is also to protect the people who work with animals, who live with them, who take care of them, and live by them, and who feed the rest of us. Mr. Speaker, I want to highlight the good work of the National Farm Animal Care Council, which consists of farmers, processors, the National Veterinary Association, National Animal Welfare Associations, provincial farm animal care councils, and so on. They work on a collaborative basis to enhance codes and practices on our farms, but they also adhere to core values, which are: they accept the use of farmed animals in agriculture, they believe that animals should be treated humanely, and they support approaches that are scientifically informed. Mr. Speaker, that is the way we work to improve animal welfare in Canada. Unfortunately, Bill C-246 could undo the good work of those organizations by unfairly targeting them through the legal system. Mr. Speaker, we have been told that this bill will be modified at committee to address the many concerns that have been raised, of which I have only barely scratched the surface here today. This presupposes the outcome of the committee hearing. Committees, as you know, Mr. Speaker, are their own masters. To modify the substance of the bill, the unanimous consent of this chamber is required. We saw that this is not achievable. Procedurally, at committee, a bill cannot simply be redrawn. Amendments may be proposed by members, but are up to the committee to adopt or reject. Significant changes are not in order, and the chair of the committee and the Speaker of the House have a responsibility, a duty deeply established in a parliamentary convention, to rule changes beyond the scope of a bill out of order. To get it to committee, the House must agree with it in principle. To change it, the committee must keep it within that principle. For me to vote for this bill here now at second reading, I must agree with the text as it is written in principle. Mr. Speaker, I do not believe that hunters, fishermen, trappers, farmers, homesteaders, and others working with animals belong in prison. I do not agree with this bill in principle, and I hope, Mr. Speaker, that my colleagues will have the wisdom and the foresight, too, to reject this bill, to kill it without further pain or suffering. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Prince